watching Channel Africa Conversations.
The last 60 years of African states' independence has amply shown that to a very significant extent, some of the wounds, some of the problems that we have are self-inflicted.
There is this predilection to be loyal and being obsessed with democracy, as if once we have a democracy, we've got the panacea for success and prosperity.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Well, a dramatic turn of events have been unfolding in Madagascar. The president has fled the country, parliament has impeached him, and an elite military unit has taken control, promising a 2-year transition. But what makes this coup different is what it was triggered by youth-led protests, mainly by Gen Z activists demanding relief from corruption, economic hardship and power cuts. Now, this raises pressing questions. Is this yet another episode in Africa's coup culture or the emergence of something new? Can a citizen-driven uprising reshape the narrative? And when we look at cases like Burkina Faso, is there ever such a thing as a good or a popular coup, one that truly delivers change rather than repression? Well, to explore these questions, I'm joined by David Letsoalo, who's a law academic, activist and Sankarist thinker, and Kabasu Babu-Katulondi, who is joining us now on the show. He's a political analyst and writer. Gentlemen, to both of you, thank you very much indeed for joining me, and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you and good afternoon, Peter. We're happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to both of you, David and Peter.
It's such a pleasure to have you, gents. Let me start with a question for both of you. And David, maybe you can start. I'm just wondering, watching the events that are playing out in Madagascar right now, is there something different that you're seeing about this story? Or is it just another coup like the ones we've seen in the past?
No, thank you very much. And let me just greet you and my brother Kabasu for this wonderful opportunity. I think this needs for not only conversation, Peter, but crucial conversations, because we're dealing with serious issues that affect us as Africans and humanity in general. And coincidentally, today is the day on which we commemorate the passing of Thomas Sankara, who was obviously killed by imperialists on this day in 1987. And just yesterday, it's the commemoration of the passing of Kambarage Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. So this revolution is this moment today for crucial conversations is held in that atmosphere. Coming back to the question, I don't think we can say it's different, because every situation is propelled and enabled by factors that affect the citizens. So an enabling environment for coups should talk to us to say what is wrong with our leadership, what is happening, for instance, with the economy, issues of development, and so on and so forth. Just to refer to Nyerere, he made an important point to say you cannot talk about development without involving the people. So it means what for us to have stability and progress, the general populace, not the select few, must be involved and benefit from the society. So what happens in a particular country that enables a coup at that particular moment may not necessarily be exactly the same with what happens in another country, but in a more general way, it points out to the issues of poor leadership, corruption, poor service delivery, and the whole issue about people not having, benefiting from the fruits of freedom if that is the case. So the whole issue of revolution should be underlined and underscored in that context, that a revolution should be about the people, benefiting the people, not a select few. For as long as we don't have a situation where the people feel that they belong in the setup, then we must be guaranteed of such moments, whether we're in a democracy or not. But the reality is that if there's something that is bending the people to rise, then that will propel a coup situation, as it were. Thank you.
Kabasu, your thoughts? Is there something different about what we're seeing in Madagascar, or is the recipe the same and likely we'll see again?
Well, I think there's a relatively a systemic difference also in terms of prompting factors, not to speak of causal factors, because we are not here from the perspective of quantitative sort of approach. So in terms of prompting factors, there's a significant difference, because what happened in the Sahel is that it was an occurrence that was designed, conceived, and materialized by the soldiers, by top army officers, and their grievance pertained fundamentally to the mismanagement of the defense force in a context where Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali were confronted by terrorists and rebels, and the leaders, I mean the army officers, realized that the defense force was being mismanaged, mishandled. So they prompted the coup. That was a direct action initiative by the military establishment. In Madagascar, what happens in Madagascar is more of the model of Nepal. So the Gen Z generation, which is a new phenomenon, societal, political phenomenon, sparked the whole process, and the military came after in terms of a reaction, or what I would conceptualize as an opportunistic coup. So it was in terms of managing the situation that had been prompted by the Gen Z, deploring the fact that electricity and water and basic services were not properly delivered, and the army came in. But it also played in the background of political dynamics and political competitions, playing in there with Rajolina and also his adversaries in the parliament, because we have seen that he, first of all, dismissed at the apex of the crisis, he dismissed the government, then he runs away, he flees the country, and then attempts to dissolve the parliament, but the parliament counteracts with impeachment. So there's a difference there. However, all these, be it in Mali, Sahel, or in Burkina Faso, Niger, or Madagascar, it points out to the challenge of materializing what we call a responsive or substantive democracy that addresses the needs of the people beyond procedural democracy, beyond mere elections. So Africa is grappling with this challenge of the so-called third wave of democratization. But the other aspect, which is also key, it is that Africa is still grappling with the construction of a performing, functional state, which can really deliver basic services and the goods to the people of Africa.
All right, and I think towards the end of that answer maybe lies the beginning of my next question, and I'll start with you, David. Why is it unlikely that we will see a coup in the United Kingdom? And what is it about Africa and African states where we're not surprised when it happens?
No, thank you. I think I like that question because it touches on what I was saying, that there must be enabling factors. My brother talks about prompting factors. So there must be an environment. If you look at Africa, starting back from the days of colonization and the aftermath thereof, if you look at the Berlin Conference, what it does. So when you talk about imperialism and colonialism, it's not just an abstract way. It impacts on the substantive realities of the people in the respective countries. So the issue of neo-imperialism and all these other factors speak to what is at the core of this thing. It's about sovereignty, It's about solidarity. And when we talk about sovereignty, it goes with resource sovereignty. Who controls your economy? Are you self-sufficient? Have you got solidarity as a continent or as a nation? So when you have these factors, they are enabling. It becomes easy for you. So democracy becomes almost meaningless in a situation where people do not have the benefits of what is happening in the country development-wise. And secondly, that when you don't have a stable, a solid attachment to an ideal, for instance, democracy, it becomes easy for even the external forces to manipulate you. What we have seen in Africa throughout, which doesn't happen even in other world, is that we have these European or imperial powers continuing to have their own stooges or proxies in African government or in African states, so that whenever their wishes are not, or their interests are not protected by the incumbent, it becomes easy to manipulate the society and the citizens and install somebody else. So now what we're seeing, getting to what was we've just said earlier on, is that when people rise from the ground on their own organically, then we'll have either the military or a politician taking an advantage of the situation, as it were. Something that we don't see in the rest of in Europe, for instance. But the reality now is that even democracy is been established, is in crisis. So it's not about the system anymore. It's about the quality and the character of the leaders that we have in place. So if you're going to be easily pliable, then that's where the problem lies. So our problem do not arise from Africa itself, as it were, because we have got an environment that makes us, our leadership and our people, easily pliable, amenable to the dictates and manipulation of external forces.
Kabasu, do you agree? I mean, I'm our people are amongst the most educated in the world. Our people are leading institutions of a global nature. We are educated in some of these schools abroad. So we're just as capable. But I'm just wondering, we have the democratic models that the West has. We have parliaments, we have municipalities, we have mayors, we have everything that we see in the West. Why does it work there and doesn't work here?
Well, I think it's well, first of all, let me say, although I subscribe to the thesis developed by my colleague David, I tend to differ a little bit with him in terms of the significance of exogenous, external factors versus internal factors. The last 60 years of African states' independence has amply shown that, to a very significant extent, some of the wounds, some of the problems that we have are self-inflicted. You look at the case of Madagascar. Madagascar has got all it takes. It has got strategic minerals like chrome, nickel, cobalt, precious stones like graphite and all these things. However, if you look at the political and social pathologies of Madagascar, they are self-inflicted. Rampant corruption, predatory oligarchy, political instability, opportunistic officers and the politicians. It has nothing to do with France. Rajoelina himself came in power through a coup in 2009, but he has not been able to trigger a state development so that the state can trigger prompt, sufficient, inclusive economic development that can respond to the needs of the people, to the point where, if you look at the metrics, you'll see that, for example, the index of human development, which encompasses your access to health, access to education, life expectancy, and all these existential conditions, you'll see that it declined from like 0.520 in 2017. It declined toward like a less than the average African level of index of human development from 0.220 in 2017 to less than 448, 0.448 in 2024, which means that the state has been allocating lesser resources to social need, to tackle social issues like education, food, agriculture, and access to health and infrastructure. So most of these plight, most of these pathologies, most of these deficiencies are fundamentally more sort of prompted by bad governance. For example, in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, it was fundamentally the issue. Coup d'etats there were fundamentally caused by the fact that the political establishment mismanaged the defense situation. It is the same situation in the DRC right now, mismanagement of the defense force. So it is more internal rather than external. And also we have an issue of developed things, because you can be a politician, you can be a vibrant politician, opposition leader, but that does not mean that you are equipped to run a state. Statesmanship requires a lot of trainings, a lot of understanding of policy process, even questioning the democracy paradigm, which is, for example, prevailing in Africa or in some of the regions like in Africa here. But the third dimension, I think, of the problem, as far as the endogenous or internal perspective is concerned, is, for example, regional leaders. Regional leaders. Look at SADC. When this situation started of genocide in Madagascar, they didn't intervene. So the people of Madagascar, the political parties, civil society, the churches, and the government were grappling with the situation, and there was no some kind of a significant intervention or sort of advice by regional leaders. It is the same thing happening in Zimbabwe, same thing happening in DRC, where SADC is nowhere to be seen, yet SADC has a lot of instruments which can prevent all these things. We have got Nepal, we have got peer review mechanisms which are not functional.
Okay, David, I'm gonna come to you now. You're a Sankarist, and you know, when we look at countries like Burkina Faso, maybe even Ghana under Jerry Rawlings initially, Sankara is often invoked by these leaders, and I'm curious about, is there such a thing as a good coup, a popular coup? Because it seems as if what we're seeing in Burkina Faso, this is what the people wanted. And we saw in Ghana, Jerry Rawlings eventually got elected. It seemed as if that was popular as well. Is there such a thing as a good coup?
Yeah, see, it brings me back to the point I mentioned that it's not about the system per se, because you can have the best layout of a democratic system, but then we have a bad leader and corrupt leader, somebody doesn't care, who doesn't even know about governance. So you can have the best infrastructure, the best democratic or governance system, but have bad leadership. So I'm not the one to be close to a particular system. I'm looking at what is happening on the ground. There is this predilection to be loyal and being obsessed with democracy, as if once we have a democracy, we've got the panacea for success and prosperity. And history has shown that there are very, very bad democratic nations, and also successful nations under let's say a military system. Let me give an example. I'm not the one to underplay the influence of neocolonialism and external forces, because these are the main agents that make the whole situation to be as it is. They don't care about the prosperity of the people. They're about just siphoning the wealth from Africa. If you look at Africa itself, we can have all the minerals, and that's the main thing that makes these external powers still to be interested in what is happening. If you look at the DRC, for instance, even in Burkina Faso, the neo-colonial powers were not interested in developing the people, but just siphoning the wealth as it were. And if you look at what happened after Sankara and even after Traore, the kind of interventions, radical interventions, people-driven, as it were, you'd see that you can have a good coup in many ways. When we talk about popular coup, we're actually buttressing the whole idea that something is driven by the people, and whether that is going to be abused or not is a different matter altogether. But an example by Traore for me is an indication of how you can undo and in order to reverse the malady of what the colonial powers have done, which continues up to today in the form of neo-imperialism. I certainly believe that we can use the concept of a good coup. It's just that somehow people are conditioned to judge, to say, if it's not democracy, then it must be bad. But history has shown that. Let's look at Gaddafi, for instance. No one has matched the record in terms of how he has delivered for his people in the system that he has used. The question of Sankara in a short period in Burkina Faso, nobody can match that. What Traore is doing right now, you can't match that. But if you're going to give other examples of people who are opportunistic and individualistic, self-interest, who have orchestrated coups for their own ends, and then you have a big picture about coups, and then you mustn't generalize and draw all coups as it were. Otherwise, we're stifling the wishes and the desires of the people, which unfortunately and ironically, democracy seems to be about. And this whole thing, we mustn't forget that it's a geopolitical thing, in the sense that even these regional powers, I'm happy that my brother mentioned the regional bodies. Find that they are actually even some captured in a way or influenced because they are financed by these external forces. Look at what ECOWAS was doing when Burkina Faso and Niger were responding to the problems that France was causing there. So you can see, even in terms of the AU, there are certain people who are driven by these external forces to manipulate their presence in these forums. So yeah, I don't think we should be in a hackneyed manner be saying this is a coup, this is what we must look at the kind of leadership, the kind of delivery that comes out of the coup, whichever we may call it, as much as we can look at what comes out of a democratically elected leadership, as it were. That's my answer, Peter.
Kabasu, I'm wondering now, and we often hear it, is that a government serves at the pleasure or the permission of the military. Is that a reality across our continent, and that in the end, actually, once the military decides your time is up, your time is up? We saw it play out in Zimbabwe, we saw it play out in Sudan, and you often see former military men put on civilian clothes, but the influence of the military continues. And I'm thinking of Hosni Mubarak here as well.
Yeah, for like Egypt, it's a very highly militarized sort of political system with what they call all components of society that are controlled by the military. The militaries are in the businesses. The militaries, they are in financial sectors and so on and so forth. It tends to be the situation more in Egypt and certain northern African countries like Algeria, which were very highly militarized. That's number one. But number two, in other countries like Ghana, you don't have that influence. Even in Nigeria, although Nigeria had experienced for several decades the role, the predominant role of the soldiers. But to a certain extent, after elections occurred in the late 90s, the situation tended to improve, where the independence or the autonomy of the military was respected, and the military establishment being sort of driven by public policy designed and implemented by people in institutions, that was also to a certain extent respected. However, in countries where there's a long history of the military controlling the state, controlling the political establishment, you'll find that it becomes now a tendency like in Sahel. But to come back to the situation of the Sahel, where we speak about, is it a good coup, is it a bad coup? It boils down to the political system, meaning the state, civil society, companies, private sectors responding, cooperating, because the term governance is more pluralist. Governance is about several entities, several actors, private, public, working together to address the basic needs of the people in terms of water, electricity, access to education, food, employment, reduction of poverty, etc. As long as there is no sort of synergy by all these actors to trigger collective governance to address the issues that are of concern to the people, we will have this propensity toward the military coming in. And then the military will come in to respond to the needs of the people, to bring in governance discipline that is necessary, for example, in getting the state as a main driver of development, or a main driver in responding to the needs of the people. Then we'll speak about a good coup. Does it, first of all, allow society to implement democracy? Does it allow society to conform, or politicians or the institution to conform with the constitutional norms? That's number one. But number two, does it help society to have a situation where the needs are addressed? That's number two. Number three, does it also reinforce security, particularly in Sahel and in countries like DRC? So if the coup is able to respond to all these three preoccupations or concerns, people will categorize it as being a good coup, because we saw, for example, in Nigeria, some coups were bad because, for example, Abacha were terrible because they led to murder, extrajudicial sort of execution, and rampant sort of predation of the country, like in the mid 80s in Nigeria. But after Obasanjo, the coup with the Obasanjo was a good coup because it led to democracy and stabilized to a very significant extent the Nigerian political system. So in Burkina Faso, it tends to be the same situation. But is it sustainable? Is it sustainable? Now in Burkina Faso, Traore commands the instrument, the machinery, the apparatus of the state for security, although security is still a concern, because although the Traore and the military establishment are leading the country is still suffering from several coups by terrorists. So the issue of security is still a complex challenge. But number two, is this establishment capable of driving a sustained development, a sustained institutional system to respond in a durable manner to the needs of the people? That is still also the challenge. And maybe lastly, with regard to the issue of democracy, I think the issue is not democracy per se. The issue is, what is the model of democracy that you want to implement? Is it majoritarian? Is it procedural? Or is it substantive, responsive democracy? Are you conscious of the fact that this democratic system that we are implementing must be responsive, must be substantive beyond elections? Because several scholars, African scholars, have shown beyond any shadow of doubt that many African political so-called elite or African dysfunctional predatory elite, they just use elections to legitimize the monopoly or the monopolization of the state for predatory ends. So it's still an issue. And we also know that with regard to Africa, although some scholars and some activists were prescribing like socialist type of democracy, we know that there's a consociational democracy, which is really designed and structured to respond to particular needs of what they call divided or developing countries like the countries of Africa. So we still have this challenge of saying, with regard to the military, if a coup occurs, does it bring security? Does it address the issue of security? Does it address the issue of the basic needs of the people? Does it address the issue of the political system that has been subscribed to by the people, be it democracy or constitutional democracy? So these are the core issues that we still have to address as Africans.
So, David, at the beginning of our conversation, we talked a little bit about the enabling factors for coups. An old Chinese proverb says that prevention is better than cure. What can African countries put in place or is missing that we need to fix to prevent coups happening? And I think both of you mentioned that our regional bodies have already got the instruments in theory that once the symptoms are there, that you really can act there and then to prevent things escalating.
Yeah, they have to be proactive, yes.
So what needs to be in place?
Yeah, well, my view is that, you know, and I said this before, that we shouldn't be obsessed with democracy as if democracy is a panacea. You know, whenever we mention coups, for instance, as a response to a very, very bad system or a bad administration, then we start coming with, you know, critical questions around whether is this sustainable, is this gonna work or whatever. But when it comes to democracy, we put those questions in the back burner. And the other point that I want to emphasize is that some of these coups, we find that the external forces, they are looking at the desperation of the people, and when the people rise, then the external forces go on and sponsor a leader to continue the proxy situation. Right. There are examples in the present circumstances in Africa where we have had something that looked like a popular coup, whereas it's actually the continuation, say, of France to you know, to continue to have the benefit of what's happening in that country with a particular proxy, you know, put in to perpetuate the very same system that the people are rising against. Your question is very, very pointed. What is the subtractive factor to eliminate the propensity for coup? So I would put it this way to say, what is it that would make the people not to rise, you know, against a bad system? So all you have to do to show an ethical leadership and a people-driven sort of governance and avoid corruption and serve the people in general, so that they can see that they belong to this. So if we don't have that kind of arrangement, that kind of situation, you still have people complaining about you know, corruption, you know, poverty, insecurity, and all. Those are the things that would continue to have this. So we all have to do is try as hard as possible to have a system of governance and an attitude that removes those kind of things. The leaders like Sankara, for instance, and I want to mention Traore as well, unapologetically, is that they are practicing what they preach. If you're talking about this has to happen and you go on to do it, how many times are people talking about we have minerals, but we are just exporting raw raw materials to the rest. We're not beneficiating. And these are the people who have actually come out against your IMF and the drawing of raw material, extractive economy, raw material from the country to wherever. So with this kind of approach that I'm talking about, looking at the positives that some of these leaders are doing and also showing, and I think that is a way in which we can eliminate these factors. So enabling factors are basically issues that relate to bad governance, self-aggrandizement, and corruption. Remove all those things and let us have the people-driven development society, as it were. I mentioned Julius Nyerere earlier on about his view of development that marginalizes the people. Make the people feel that they belong to this project. In that way, the chances of having all these whatever coups or whatever will be attended to. That's my view. Thank you.
Kabasu, I'm wondering now, in modern times, where the weapons of war are different for citizens, we now have social media. We now are able to organize very quickly. We're now able to expose things in live Facebooks and so on and so forth. But what these people-led movements, the challenge they have is they don't have a leader. And once that which they are wanting has happened, there is this space. And we saw in Sudan, for example, where, as David was describing, there are people then who say, right, the work has been done, let's step in. Are all the coups in the future going to be people-driven? And if that's the case, are we going to see repeats of Sudan? And maybe we might even see that happening in Madagascar, where we don't quite know who's going to fill that space. Right now, the leader of CAPSAT might put his hand up and say, I'm going to run things. But the reality is the movement wasn't about him, whereas the military coups of the past, there was a person, and that person led and took over. Is this going to have a new face and a new danger going forward?
Yeah, it might in contexts where there's a propensity or there's a previous experience in which the military had that tendency of exploiting any opportunity of that nature to seize power, or in societies or political systems where there's been a situation where prevailing political contradictions or political competitions also tended to sort of use or subcontract the militaries to attain whatever political end they had in mind. But what happened in Madagascar really indicate that phenomena like that Gen Z dynamics, they will occur. They can occur almost everywhere in Africa, even in South Africa. But now it depends on the solidity and coherence of the political system, of the institutions, to anticipate on that, to develop like a sort of a political intelligence, so to say, in order to see in advance, to preempt such situations so that they can respond very rapidly. So it depends on the development of the political system, the institutions, if they can sense such a situation arising so that they can respond quickly. What happened in Madagascar was that Rojolina tended to had some kind of illusion that he was still powerful, and he was taking his time until the situation was out of control. But you must also understand that in any political system, there are always fragmentations, divisions, opportunistic elements, both in the political establishments who couldn't take certain steps. And when they see such a situation where these Gen Z youngsters, they don't have any political ambition. What they want is just to have their needs being responded to in a significant manner. They don't have any ambition of becoming president or a minister. They just want the needs to be responded, to be tackled, to be addressed. And once that is done, or if it's not done, they will continue. And once it's done, they can stop. However, elements in the political system, the military, or people in parliament or in the opposition will seize, will grab that opportunity to advance their own whatever ideological or political pursuit they had envisaged. However, with regard to Africa, there is a necessity, imperative necessity for African intellectuals, Pan-Africanists, whatever their political persuasion or ideological persuasion is, to create a synergy where we have to develop, because some of these political systems are weak in terms of their internal capacities, and they need the help of their brothers and sisters in the region in terms of anticipating, looking into conflicts, looking into crises that are emerging. You take the case of the DRC, where I am from the early, from 2019, 2020, everybody could see the writing on the wall. SADC didn't intervene in terms of going there to say, we are brothers and sisters. If there are problems, we can address these problems peacefully. They waited until a certain time where now SADC decided to send, without even having scrutinized, analyzed properly the situation on the ground, they decided to send troops of SADC in the northern Kivu, and we all know the tragedy that occurred there. South African soldiers were killed. So we have here, at the same time that we deploy critique, analysis, prescription to countries, we have to really be also as rigorous in terms of questioning and calling on regional bodies, regional leaders. And as I had emphasized earlier on, they have tools. This peer review mechanism was supposed to help African leaders who have got experience to go to certain countries and look at certain metrics, look at certain parameters to say, are we seeing here potential for crisis, potential for tribulations, contradictions, or potential for growth, which we can actually promote and help these countries to stabilize. That has not happened. So if we are to be Pan-Africanist, committed to development, if we are going to be Sankarist or Lumumbist or Mandalist or Mbekist, committed to seeing Africa develop in a durable, sustainable manner without being over idealistic about some occurrences which are contextual, I think the synergy for Africa's stability must occur, and Africa's leaders, scholars, activists must work together to start saying, how do we work together? Because the Pan-Africanist paradigm is about solidarity. Yeah. It's about solidarity. Is there anything that why is it that Botswana is flourishing as a democracy, pluralist democracy? They're even able to sort of master their own sort of factors that could elsewhere could have prompted crisis. Botswana is able to do that. This also leads to acknowledging that the theory or paradigm of James Robinson's "Why Nations Fail" applies to this African island. Why is it that Mauritius is so prosperous and stable? There's cohesion there, and Madagascar, which is endowed with more minerals, is failing. Right. Is failing. So I think that synergy of Africans, of true Pan-Africanists, developmental Pan-Africanists, must occur. As Marx used to say or said, it is not sufficient to interpret society. We must transform society.
As we speak, as we debate, we are finding more and more questions to answer, but sadly time is not on our side. So I'm going to have to say thank you to both of you for an engaging conversation. And I hope that our viewers enjoyed it as much as I did. To both of you, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you very much for the crucial conversations. Please go on with the journey, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. So that was David Letsoalo, who's a law academic, activist and Sankarist thinker, and Kabasu Babu-Katulondi, who's a political analyst and writer from the DRC, speaking to us about this coup culture that we've been seeing over decades in Africa, and we shining some light on some of the reasons why it happens and some of the things that can be done to prevent going forward. I hope you enjoyed that conversations, and that's how we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in. Before I go, just a reminder that we'd really like to hear from you. I'd like to hear what you thought about today's show, but also what would you like to see more of? Please, you'll see on your screen now our social media pages, our email address, and just write to us, share your thoughts, and hopefully we can make these conversations more and more the kinds of conversations that you want to listen to. In the meantime, from me and the team, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You are watching Channel Africa Conversations.